Hello everybody, welcome, good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar on exit interviews and the science of employee turnover. Firstly, to introduce myself, I'm Dave Beasley, Talent Director here at Cohesion. Now, companies often tell us that retention is such an important factor and that they're considering exit interviewing as a tool to understand the reasons why employees leave. This afternoon, I wanted to bring together two of our experts to ask them some questions that usually come up. Now, before I introduce my colleagues, we have some housekeeping areas to cover off. First of all, if I could please ask you to click the raise hand button so that we know that you can all hear us. Just while you're doing that, I also have Alex here with us today, assisting with our technology and collating any questions you may have throughout the webinar. So please do feel free to type them into the box that you can see on screen, and we will endeavour to answer these for you. Great, so I think everybody can hear, so we'll kick off. Joining me today is one of my colleagues, Debbie Edmondson, Talent Director here at Cohesion. I'm also joined by Anna Posse, Cohesion's Exit and Retentions Specialist. So what are we going to be covering off today? We'll be looking at the reasons why employees leave organisations. We'll discuss what exit interviews can tell us about employee turnover. And of course, we'll be taking some questions at the end of the session itself. You may recall that we asked you a question upon signing up to the webinar itself, and that was around the main reasons you felt you had leavers within your businesses. We wanted to show you some of the results there. So from what we can see on the screen here, it's interesting that main reasons that seem to be coming up in your organisations surrounds management behaviours, or working relationships with managers, and this is followed by areas of lack of career progression and pay being the third top reason. I think that's really, really interesting, and sort of teaming that in with what we know about why people are leaving organisations. From the thousands of exit interviews we've conducted for our clients over many years, these themes do absolutely occur regularly. What we have noticed is that there are some differences across sectors. So, for example, across organisations in health and social care organisations, we see a lot of leavers suggesting that it's because of their hours and shift patterns, as with pay and benefits. Within housing, we might also see management behaviours come up, which we've already touched upon. And in construction, interestingly, we see a trend towards lack of progression and opportunities for promotion being common reasons as to why people are leaving. I think it's important to bear in mind that there are absolutely differences between organisations, between sectors, and I guess the key message here really is that you need to explore this for your own business. Right, so I'm going to kick off with some questions to the floor here, and I'm going to come across to Anna to begin with. Anna, could you start by talking us through what are exit interviews, and why would an organisation consider implementing such a programme?
Yes, of course, Dave. So firstly, what are exit interviews? They are conversations with leavers in your business, either people who have left already or those who are working notice and still in your business. I would sort of point out that we would say that voluntary leavers are the leavers that you're wanting to speak to for exit interviews, probably exclusively those. I mean, you could expand it across to those who are being made redundant, but then, you know, having conversations about why you're leaving and they've been made redundant could prove a little bit tricky. So I would say just with voluntary leavers. And as to why an organisation would consider implementing an exit interview programme, well, there are a few. Really, firstly, it's to better understand employee turnover in their business. It could be that within the business there is a bit of a feeling, a hunch, if you like, as to what's going on, but it is just that, it's just a hunch at that stage. It could be that within the business there are concerns over an increase in employee turnover, and there's a real need to be able to explore this. There could be concerns around the cost of losing key people within their business. Obviously, there's various associated costs with employee turnover. And also, the business could be looking for insights into which particular initiatives would be best to reduce their employee turnover.
Absolutely. Different options there and reasons as to why you might be consider implementing such a programme. Debs, I'm going to come across to you now in terms of different ways of conducting interviews. I guess there's different areas. Can you talk us through what that might look like?
Yeah, of course. So there are, of course, a few different ways of completing exit interviews in your business. So when organisations are doing it themselves in-house, we tend to see them being done face-to-face, either by an HR representative or by the lever's line manager predominantly. So there is, of course, a benefit here in that it's relatively easy to complete the interview this way, but it does have a time impact there as well, and inevitably lacks some level of confidentiality. So the discussions may not reveal truthful responses, particularly if you consider that a leaver might be going due to a relationship with their manager, for example. In terms of other methods, we conduct them on behalf of our clients over the telephone and input responses into a cloud-based system. And we actually find as a third party that leavers tend to buy into the confidentiality and anonymity that it provides them. And they do really open up, and sometimes probably a bit too much. But it does allow us a really consistent approach because we use a dedicated team of trained interviewers. But most importantly, it can be done out of hours as well to suit the leaver. So evenings and weekends, for example. And I guess the other benefit really of doing it via the telephone is that you can really probe and delve into the responses given. You can ask some supplementary questions to really get a true picture, because there's often a lot of emotion attached to reasons for leaving, particularly if there's a perceived injustice. So just being impartial can actually remove this emotional element somewhat. And I guess just in terms of other methods, another common way of getting leaver data is via a paper-based or an online survey. And they are, of course, quick and easy to set up, but they do tend to be less personal, and they don't necessarily have such a high take-up rate either. So we don't tend to find that they're a substitute for having an actual conversation with somebody, because you just can't probe to the same level.
Great, fantastic. And so, yeah, there's clearly a wealth of different ways there, and some have benefits over others to consider. When I also wanted to look at, Debs, when is the best time to be conducting these interviews with leavers?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, because the timing for exit interviews is really important. We would ideally suggest that you collect that data or conduct those interviews before the leaver has gone, so during the notice period if you can. And that's because there's a real potential for a save if they've not yet left the business. So you might just pick up on something which is a relatively easy fix, so maybe a change of location or organising some much needed training. And particularly with early leavers, it's within those first few months of starting with an organisation is when they're most likely to have a bit of a wobble. And actually for one of our clients recently, we spoke to a leaver who hadn't been in the business for very long. They'd had a bit of a patchy start to the organisation, which wasn't helped because their line manager had been out of the business, and it made them feel that they'd made the wrong decision in accepting the role and had put in their resignation. However, we were able to flag it with the HR team, who stepped in. They've put some measures in place to make some improvements, and actually the leaver withdrew their resignation in that case. So it can be done. You can make a save if you can speak to them before they've actually gone. And then probably just the other thing to mention around timing is just to be flexible. So if you can work around the employee's work times, call them out of hours, or when they feel that they're more able to have a conversation without being overheard or without being distracted by other things. So obviously early mornings, evenings, weekends, that they tend to work well for us. And they do improve the take-up rate as well as the quality of the data.
Sure, absolutely. And Anna, I want to touch on, obviously the reason we're doing this is to get open and honest feedback. So how do we go about encouraging people to be really, really honest in the answers that they are providing?
Yeah, I mean, it is important to get that honest feedback. And I would say to really enable that to happen, you need to perhaps think about having the person conducting the interviews to be somebody other than their previous line manager, obviously, for obvious reasons. And also to explain that all the data taken is going to be anonymised, and also explain clearly the reasons for doing the exit interview, saying that it's going to be fed back through to make improvements where improvements can be made and are required, and that it's a positive thing, which it is, to take time out to collect feedback from your workforce. Also, take time to set the scene, make the person feel very comfortable, and that's going to obviously help to get that more honest feedback.
Great, thank you. Now, many companies say that they have an exit program in place, but what they find is actually there's some inconsistency, or perhaps interviews are not always happening. So Anna, I'm going to stay with you here. How can this be resolved? How can we ensure consistency?
So I would say, firstly, to really try to, or ensure that this becomes part of your existing exit interview process. So however you're currently managing leavers out of your business, whatever process you follow, whatever forms that there are associated with that, this part of the process needs to seamlessly fit in to that existing process. Also, you need to really hold accountability for those people who are going to be conducting the interviews for consistency's sake. Make sure that they are completed. You can check back on this as well. You can look at your voluntary leaver figures for a period of time versus the number of completed interviews coming through. Are you seeing what you're expecting to see? Is it actually happening? You could consider making just one person responsible for the whole process, or indeed for the whole of the interviewing, if that's achievable for your resources. You could also think about using trained interviewers. If you do this, this really will help consistency, because you're going to have not only consistency with the way that the interviews are conducted and the way the questions are asked, but also in the way that the answers from the leaders are interpreted and then that information is recorded.
Yeah, as you say, I think it's really important that whoever's doing that is really comfortable in being able to deliver the questions and probe, as we talked about earlier. So some great points there. Deb, so I'm going to come back to you now. We talked about the different ways of conducting interviews. We looked at the best time to conduct interviews. I guess it'd be useful to look at this stage, what questions should we be including? And I also want to know, is there anything that just isn't appropriate that we should avoid asking as part of an exit interview?
Yeah, excuse me. So in our experience, I would say a real mix of questions is needed. So you do need some questions that can be rated, or which will allow you to gather the overall sort of percentage figures, but you also need some free text answers to really help tell the story behind the responses and understand the motivations of employees. So sort of overlapping or supporting questions are a really helpful way to do this and allow you to probe deeper and really get to the truth. So for example, if you're asking why are you leaving, we would suggest you follow that up with, well, what would have made you stay? And really, if you can analyse those two responses together, see if they do support each other, or actually if there's something there that you can just dig a little bit deeper and find out a bit more reliable responses to come out there. So I think sometimes organisations only think of exit interviews in terms of reasons for leaving, but actually they're a great opportunity to also get further information about what life in your organisation is really like. So it is worth including questions around training, induction, culture, maybe the perception of career progression opportunities or the support they receive from their line manager. It really helps you to build a bigger picture where you can really spot areas for improvement that might be needed. But just coming back to your previous question around maybe what not to include, I would just say don't use leading or ambiguous questions in your exit interviews. You really want the leaver to tell you what they really think without you leading them necessarily in the wrong direction.
Great, thank you. And you'll note from the slides we've given some example questions that you may want to take away for use internally. Deb's also looking at the implementation process, I guess, of an exit program. How do we go about doing that and getting it in place and set up and working?
Yeah. So firstly, it's about the planning in the initial stages, and by this I mean think about what you want to get out of it at the end. Think about what you want your reporting to look like and how you want your data to be split. So if you'd like to break some data down, maybe by region or function or business unit, or even by maybe length of service of the leaver or the age of the leaver, then we really need that information up front in order to set that up in the system from the outset. You need to really define the process as well, and I think Anna mentioned this earlier, but make it part of your existing process and embed it. But also communicate to the business that you're doing exit interviews. Many leavers that we speak to actually tell us that it's quite a positive thing. You know, they view it as a positive thing, that the organisation wants their feedback. I would say think about your data collection as well at implementation stage. So which method is going to work best for you? What resources do you have internally, if any, to support it? And that really goes for the analysis and reporting on the data at the other end as well. So what resource do you have, and how do you want to share that information back to the business? Who in the business needs to see it? And then lastly, I would say it's also important to evaluate the programme over time. So questions can become irrelevant with business changes. So you might want to expand on a particular area of questions or change something where there has been a business change or if there's a concern there. So do keep checking back.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to pick up on one of those points there that I think is really, really key when you're obviously taking a lot of information from your leavers. And I'm going to come across to you for this one in terms of the analysis. So how do I go about recording the information itself and, quite crucially, analysing the data itself?
Yeah, so I'll take you first by recording, Dave. So I guess really how you're going to record your data, the best tip for this is we need to have a uniform system in place. So whichever method you choose, make that the one method. So whether it be online survey or form or interview, make that the same rather than having bits and pieces going on. That's going to make it harder to collate all the data together. Excel is a great tool. You know, if you can get your finished lever data into Excel, it's going to make it really easy for you to then manipulate that and to report from it. As to the other analysing top tips, really, I mean, we would start by suggesting looking at some trend analysis. Firstly, look at the data as a whole, what is it telling you, and then start looking at those various categories that you may have thought about putting in at the beginning of your process. So looking at the lever information by job type, potentially by generation or age, by gender, by regional location, and really drill down and see what is this data telling you. What you decide to look at this point may really depend on what you already know within your business or what you perhaps are already tracking internally. So you may have an engagement survey, for example. This could follow suit with what you're already currently looking at. Reporting, it's obviously really important to share data regularly with your business and other leaders within the business can see what's happening. And then for further analysis, you know, if analysis isn't going to be your strong point, see what other opportunities are out there for the analysis to be done. I mean, we are really passionate about uncovering true reasons people leave across our clients' organisations, and we regularly undertake wider analysis. Quite recently, we were able to engage the support of some MSc students at Aston University and to do some research projects for us around particular reasons for leaving. So really, to just use whatever resources are available to you.
Great, thank you. I think we've got
sure,
now,
exactly. So just on the screen now are just some examples of some quite visual reporting that we put together. This is just a bit of a snapshot, really, of the sorts of things that you can do with the data once they're put together. This is obviously quite visual, and making it visual like this, we're really hoping to make the data as impactful as possible.
Thanks, Anna, that's great. So, sticking with this theme really, and looking at the real benefits, I think, you know, clearly a lot of themes are coming through as we're talking, but are there any sort of key benefits you can talk us through as to, you know, a business will have from getting the data itself?
So firstly, I would say the big key benefit is having reliable data, data that you can report on and feel very comfortable and rely upon. It enables organisations to really be data-driven in their decision-making. It could be that there are suspicions within the business as to why people are leaving, and it no longer becomes suspicions, it's now evidence that can be reported back comfortably and reliably. Also, by having an exits programme, you're going to be able to track changes over time, so you'll be able to measure the impact of any initiatives that are put in place. For example, how successful was a recent pay review that happened potentially? Are we now seeing less leavers saying they're leaving due to pay, for example? You're also going to be able to feedback other insights of your business and your employer brand. Those other questions that Debbie mentioned earlier, other than the core leaver questions around culture, you're going to really get a lot of feedback on that. So positive PR piece we put on our slide here, really that's just to remind everybody that any organisation that's taking the time to ask for feedback from their staff at any point, and particularly on leaving, is a really positive thing. The final real plus point of an exits programme, we would say, is the potential to capture information from potential returners to your business. There's a real perception that people leaving are all really disgruntled and leaving because they're unhappy. We just know that from speaking to our clients' leavers, that's really just not the case in many examples. There's all sorts of varying reasons why people leave. We call these happy leavers. And for several of our clients, we include questions which enable us to collect contact information from people who'd be really happy to return to the business in the future.
Great, thank you, Anna. That's a really key message there, and something quite positive that can come out of the exit interview process. Right, so we've had lots of interesting questions come in, not only today, but I know leading up to the webinar itself. I do want to say that if you have given us a question, please be reassured that we will absolutely get back to you all individually. One question that I wanted to cover that's come up a couple of times is all about the difference between exit and retention interviews, which I think it's quite good for us just to touch on that really. What I would say is that effectively both are types of conversations with employees, and quite obviously we touched on exits today as sort of taking place when somebody is leaving. Don't forget about retention interviewing, which we also see is just as important. And retention or stay interviews can happen throughout their employment or employees cycle with you. So at any point that they are with you, you can be speaking with them as well. So to give some examples, we speak with new starters for our clients' businesses. We'll touch base after 1 week, 4 weeks, 3 months down the line. They're really good touch points to have with new starters, and really understand if there's anything quite quickly that we can turn around and prevent it from becoming an exit. And it links back to what we've talked about throughout in really allowing you that save before they actually decide to go. And I guess to summarise, I wanted to finish by asking both Debs and Anna, perhaps for just a key takeaway message from you both, if possible, that we can share. So Debs, I'm going to come to you first, if possible.
Okay, yeah, of course. So I guess key takeaways from me, you might think you know why people are leaving your business, but actually until you really start asking them, I think it's safe to say you've only got a suspicion or a hunch, as Anna mentioned earlier. Secondly, if you're taking the time to ask for feedback, make sure that you use it. And I think it's also important to remember, we were talking about trend analysis earlier. Just one person saying one comment doesn't mean that that's a trend and that's what everybody thinks. So one of the big benefits, obviously, of conducting a program is that you do get to find out actually multiple comments, and you can see it's more than one person thinking this across our business.
Yeah, absolutely. Some really valid points there. And Anna, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, so I would add that really the data that you collect from your exit program and the comments from your leavers will really tell you and guide you on how best to make improvements. It's not going to be overly complicated to quite easily see which initiatives are going to be best. There's no real need to reinvent the wheel. And then any improvements that you do then put into place should really help to reduce your employee turnover rate.
Absolutely, thank you. Well, I guess that brings me to say thank you everybody for joining us today. We do hope you found the session useful. I'd also like to thank Debs and Anna for sharing their expertise with us today. Before you do leave, we wanted to mention a couple of areas. We will be sharing with you via email an employee turnover calculator so that you can easily work out the cost of turnover to your individual business. Please have a play, let us know your feedback, what you think. And we're also going to be emailing you some details of a current promotion we're offering. So look out for this, and we'd be happy to hear from you if you have any further questions, have any need for further information, or would like to know more about partnering with Cohesion to design and deliver a comprehensive exit and retention programme. Thank you very much all.